The rise of the USSR came early in the 20th century around the time of the First World War. During World War I, Russia had been led by Tsar Nicholas II. During the war, the Tsar demanded that most of the food from farmers be sent to the armies. This led to an increased price of food in the markets in Russia because the supply from the farmers had decreased due to the war. The increased price was followed by starvation because many people couldn't afford the little food that was offered. Eventually, riots had been started by civilians, but instead of ending the riots, most guards joined them. Tsar Nicholas was forced to step down from his hair declined as well. During the Tsar rule, Russia had set up a provisional government from the time being. However, the government failed to keep more food toward the markets in Russia. At this point, much of the Russian army had either died or deserted, and Russia had little to no military power. Multiple failed attempts to feed the army and provide it with weapons and gear, and failed attempts to feed the public, a terrible economy falling apart, led to an increased popularity of the Bolshevik Party. The Bolsheviks had promised peace, land, and bread. Most of the nation only cared for the last part. In Russia, hunger had grown rapidly. The second riot started would be to end the provisional government and have the government run by the Bolsheviks, the beginning of the Soviet Union. The economic policy of the USSR was Vladimir Lenin's new economic plan. It was used from 1921 to 1928 to retract from their old policy of extreme centralization and doctrine socialism. The NEP was needed to re-stabilize the economy after war communism caused the economy to crash. The NEP allowed people to control private industry such as agricultural, retail trade, and small industry, while the government continued to control heavy industry, transport, banking, and foreign trade. Money had been re-established in 1922 because it was removed due to war communism. The NEP created stability in the economy and let the Soviet Union and its people recover after years of war and poorly managed government. The NEP allowed people to flourish. These people were known as NEP men. Even though the NEP helped people and the economy, it was only used so the communists could stay in power. The beginning of the end of the USSR started in the late 1950s when Nikita Khrushchev took control. His first reform to the economy was decentralizing economic control to try to fix the complexities of their current economic affairs. However, a few years later, he made another reform to reverse the old reform by returning to a very centralized control of the economy. Even after these reforms, economic growth continued to decline, and the inefficiencies of their system became larger and more visible. Later, during the 1970s, more small reforms were made to slightly decentralize the market. Yet again, these reforms failed to do anything to fix the declining economy. In the early 1980s, their productivity growth fell below zero. Now, under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, radical reforms were introduced that tried to keep the socialist ideas and central control over primary societal goals. This era of restructuring was called perestroika. It supported individual, private incentive and was very different from the original belief of their government. At first, it looked like a success and a step in the right direction. But in the late 80s and early 90s, Soviet firms took advantage of the new freedoms and the new investment opportunities, which caused the economy to decline again. Also, localized priorities became more important than national concerns, which completely opposed the government's original belief. Finally, with the economy and politics in ruins, the Soviet Union collapsed on December 26, 1991. The new economic plan positively affected the members of the USSR because the new economic plan allowed them to be in control of small-scale industry, and those who did well in this time were known as NEP men.